Wat Tyler was born on January the 4th, 1341 in Kent, England, and is known for being the main leader of the Peasants' Revolt of 1381. There isn't a lot known about his early years, but England was going through one of the worst moments in its history 7 years after his birth, when it was hit by the bubonic plague, also known as the Black Death. This killed between 30 and 40% of the population in England and throughout Europe. It's said that Wat Tyler was fascinated by John Ball, who had trained as a priest in York. John Ball was preaching ideas contrary to the faith of the church, holding radical sermons in many towns around England, and for this he was thrown in prison on multiple occasions. In 1366 he was excommunicated, meaning it was forbidden for anyone to hear him preach, but this didn't stop him and he continued to preach his beliefs, even doing so in churchyards after official services. One of the main ideas behind his preachings was that all humans should be treated equally. Having these ideas in the 1300s would likely get you into a lot of trouble. Wat Tyler had served in King Edward III's military and then became a blacksmith in Kent and rose up as one of the community leaders. In 1377, Edward III died and his 11-year-old grandson, Richard II, was crowned King of England. During the early years of Richard's reign, the faith in the monarchy was wavering, and the young king's decision-making was being heavily influenced by John of Gaunt, a royal prince and military leader. 4 years later, in May of 1381, the Peasants' Revolt began. The main trigger for the revolt was the sanctioned poll tax that had been applied 3 times in 4 years. It would rise from 4 pence for every person over 14, regardless of stature, to 12 pence per person aged 15 and above. This greed from the government was mostly to help cover the cost of their wars over in France, as England was also in the middle of the 100 Years' War. The new tax would raise £160,000 compared to the previous £18,600. In comparison to today's money, this would be like getting £130 million versus £15 million. It wasn't just about money for Tyler. He also demanded that each labourer was allowed to work for the employer of their choice, and wanted to end serfdom. Serfdom basically bound the peasants to plots of land which required them to work for the lords of the manor who owned that plot. It's said that the incident that ignited Tyler's fury was when a tax collector stripped his 15-year-old daughter to see if she was old enough to pay the new tax. He attacked and killed the tax collector, which was the spark that started the rebellion. This created uprisings across England, with a large part of it being in Essex and Kent. Tyler was joined by villagers from all over the south of England, and together they decided to march on London and speak to the king about the tax, and come to an agreement of a better deal for all. The blame wasn't put on the young king, and the anger of the revolt was mostly aimed at his advisors, Simon Sudbury and John of Gaunt, who the peasants thought were corrupt. On the 2nd of June, villagers converged on London, first attacking Rochester Castle, then Simon Sudbury's Canterbury, and finally heading towards Blackheath, which was just outside of London. On the way, they had released the mad priest of Kent, John Ball, from prison, who gave a sermon before heading into London.
From the beginning, all men by nature were created alike, and our bondage or servitude came in by the unjust servitude of naughty men. The time has come, appointed to us by God, in which he may cast off the yoke of bondage and recover liberty.
Upon hearing the sermon from John Ball, the rebels stormed the Tower of London. Richard II rode to Mile End to meet with Wat Tyler and initially agreed to their demands and asked that they go home in peace. Happy with the outcome, many started to return home. Unknown to Tyler at the time, some rebels, during the attack on the Tower of London, murdered the Archbishop of Canterbury, Simon Sudbury, and the Treasurer Robert Hales, cutting off their heads on Tower Hill and putting them on pikes for all rebels to see. Because the majority of his armies were in France, Richard went into hiding overnight, scared for his life. In the morning, Richard and the Lord Mayor of London, Sir William Walworth, met with Tyler and the rebels once again at Smithfield, outside of the city's walls. There are mixed records of what happened next. Some have said that at the meeting, Walworth was so angry with the arrogance of Tyler that he drew his dagger and slashed at his throat, badly injuring Tyler in the process. while other records state Tyler was the one to draw his dagger, who was then struck by Walworth and then finished off by Ralph Standish, who was a royal esquire. Richard somehow talked his way out of the situation that he'd found himself in, promising what was asked of him by the peasants. This led to the crowds that surrounded him dispersing. The peasants' revolt was over. Richard didn't keep any of the promises that he had made, claiming that they were made under threat and therefore were no longer valid. So what happened to the mad priest, you may be wondering? After the revolt had ended, soldiers visited the villages of Essex and Kent and executed the ringleaders of the revolt. They were searching for John Ball, who was eventually found in Coventry. He stood trial in front of King Richard and admitted to his charges. He was sentenced to death and was offered the chance to repent his sins and save his soul. He refused and was hung, drawn and quartered. His head was stuck on a pike and displayed at London Bridge, and the rest of his body was quartered and each piece was put on show in 4 different towns. After all that had happened, the revolt was mostly unsuccessful and had pretty much failed as a social revolution. However, taxes were eventually reduced for the poorer classes, but serfdom was still a thing, meaning they were still bound as workers to the landlords who owned the plots of land. Serfdom was practiced long after these events, and it took around 400 years before those laws were abolished. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe to the channel for similar content, and I'll see you soon.